Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniela. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Meaningful Hearts podcast. Today, I am writing solo dolo again. In an ideal situation, Andrew and I would be recording together, but sometimes life happens and we aren't able to. And I think this is an opportunity to further, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess to further emphasize that it's not always about trying to do 100%. That sometimes 1%, I think more often than not, actually, 1% is even better than trying to do 100%. Because it's important for us to still show up in some way, shape, or form for you all and have consistency. That's not what the episode is about, but I thought to throw that in there. What I want to talk about today is perception. Andrew and I may have talked about this before, but today I want to do it a little bit differently than we have in the past. I don't know if anybody listens to Diary of a CEO, but if you don't, it might be a good idea to. He interviews a lot of interesting people. They're long interviews, but they can be very informative and very insightful. And I share that because I recently have been listening to a particular interview where he's talking to a former CIA spy. And the CIA spy in the interview talks about perception. And I agree with his definition of perception. He also talks about perspective, the difference between perception and perspective. But I won't get into that part. I'll leave it as a cliffhanger for you guys to listen to. But his definition of perception, which, like I said, I agree with, is what you believe you see, where you sit, and how you see the world around you. And perception is based on pretty much just emotions and what you're feeling. He gives the example of when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're a little scared, and then you make the assumption that the pile of socks is potentially like a rat or a mouse based on your perception of what you're currently seeing. So it's a pretty interesting analogy. Now, how I want to relay this all to you is really through something that I've learned in my own life. So, growing up, I had a very specific perception of my dad's wife. I didn't like her. I used to believe that she was a big reason as to why my parents didn't work out or why they split up. And I didn't treat her so well when I was growing up, I think. I think I was kind of mean. I had an attitude towards her. I think I also blamed her for the things that maybe I went through at some point in my life, because since she had kind of taken my dad, I guess, my dad wasn't in my life. And so my life was difficult. And this is something that I carried with me literally up until maybe 2-3 years ago, as I started to really do inner work and reflect on my life and how I felt about my parents, how I felt about myself, how I felt about the things that happened to me. And after having different kinds of conversations, after asking myself different kinds of questions, I realized something. I realized that my perception of my dad's wife and just a side note, actually, I refer to her as my dad's wife and not as my stepmom. And part of the reason, at least in the past, uh, was because I just couldn't stand the thought of considering her as my potential stepmom. Now I like throw it around from time to time, but I still, I guess out of habit, I still refer to her as my dad's wife, but it doesn't have the same meaning behind it. It's different. So anyway, back to what I was saying. So I realized that my perception of her was truthfully based on the things that my mom would say about her and my dad. My mom, she's not a bad person. I think that she has things that she's dealing with and trying to heal from still. And I think growing up, it was very difficult for her to emotionally regulate. And so, whenever she was upset about something that my dad didn't do for me or for my brother, she would blame it on my dad's wife and his decision to be with her. And I realized that the things that I felt for my dad's wife, the anger, the resentment, the blame, were really not me. They were really my mom, which I think is a very powerful realization for me to have had, because now my perception of my dad's wife has changed. Now my perception of her is, wow, you know, I actually really admire her, because I guess the way that I think about it is, if I was somebody's partner and they had kids prior to that, and I was trying to have some type of relationship with them, and all I get met with is resistance, at some point, I'm going to be like, all right, enough is enough. Like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. And sure, I mean, it was growing up, right? So she had to have patience, but she also chose to have patience and never stop trying. And now I think we have what I think is a really good relationship. We've definitely had meaningful conversations where I'm like, wow, you know, she's not the person that was painted out to be. She is just somebody who is trying to learn from her own decisions, from her own life experiences, and still be there. She's very welcoming. She's a little quirky, which is pretty funny, but she really is not what I perceived her to be growing up. And so my hope in sharing this with you all is, I guess, to encourage reflection of your perception of the people in your life. Is the perception that you have of the people in your life, especially those who maybe you don't have a good perception of, is it entirely accurate? Not to say that your feelings are not valid. I think that my feelings were valid. And there were genuine things that I did hold her accountable for that happened to me. But it wasn't my anger anymore. I mean, it wasn't my mom's anger anymore. It was my own. And I think when I learned to separate that, I was able to come to a place where I could process my anger or my resentment or whatever I was feeling, and then let my mom deal with what she's feeling, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'd like to believe that I'm making sense, and I think this is something that I say from time to time on our show, but I don't necessarily always know if I'm making sense. Just pretty funny, at least to me. But I did essentially, it did help me heal from those heavy feelings that I was feeling towards her. Once I was able to separate that my mom's perception doesn't have to be mine either. I can have a relationship with my dad's wife. this is actually going to be the first year of my life where, one, I remembered her birthday, and two, I want to celebrate her birthday with her. And I put together like a really cute gift. I hope she likes it. But I do want to celebrate her. And I think that that's a really powerful realization that I've had in my life. I'm actually getting a little emotional right now, but in a good way, to just think of how different I feel based on my perception of her changing. And so again, I encourage you all to think about, what's your perception of the people around you? And is it based on things that you've been told? Is it based on purely emotion? Because that's something that the CIA spy was saying, that perception is based on really only emotions. Now, he also says don't necessarily trust your gut, but I think he means don't trust your gut in trying to make business decisions. I will let you guys make your own conclusions about that. But he says that it's based purely on emotions, and it's personal and it's subjective. And I think that's very true. Perception is and can be based on those things. Doesn't have to be. But yeah. I lost my train of thought there. But it's okay. I think that's what I would leave you all with, is to do some reflecting. And hopefully the next episode, Drew and I will be together again. And if not, then we'll make it work. Thank you all for listening. And I hope you're having a wonderful... If you're in the tri-state area, I hope that you're having a wonderful time enjoying how much the weather is increasing. I am not, but I hope that you all are, or wherever you are. I hope that you are enjoying the weather in some way, shape, or form. And we'll catch you on the next one.